Today I want to talk about why I prefer Hordes and Warmachine over 40k. Hey everybody, Buckwheat here. As the title suggested, with this new channel, I wanted to get started with why I personally prefer Hordes and Warmachine over 40k. And of course, these are just opinions, none of them matter, really. It's just what I think. I should probably talk about my initial experience with 40k. I came from a background of a long-time 40k player. And I think the first thing that excited me about that game was the models. I remember seeing as a young kid, I remember seeing like Chaos Space Marines and Tyranids and Orcs, and I was just like awestruck by the variety and how cool those models looked. I remember the first time I saw Warmachine or Hordes, and I certainly didn't feel that way. That was probably my initial response. I remember 40k's models looking so crisp and clean, and the sculpts being so great. And even now, like if you look at some of the newer models, things like Mortarion, Nagash, those are just awesome looking models. They're just so great. Like I can't even describe it. Like the models are positioned so cool. They're kind of like floating and flying. They've got cool stances and poses, and they look so like lifelike in their movement as far as the pose, which certainly is new. I mean, the older models didn't look quite like that, but 40k always did a good job of making their models look great and having certain positions that you could put them in to like really give them a unique flair. Frankly, Hordes Warmachine didn't. They're very kind of ugly to begin with. I remember looking at the first Signar kind of Warjack models that were like really bulky up top, those little heavy metal models, and they look, I would like the steampunk appeal, and I get that that's part of it, but proportionally they just look like shoulders sitting on a torso. Much like, I mean, to be fair, 40k does a lot of big shoulders too. Let's not forget the shoulder pad, like hugeness that is 40k. But the Warmachine models just didn't appeal to me initially. And over time, as they changed their models, they actually did a lot of good things. The models look a lot more sleek and stylish. Proportionally, I think they did a lot better work with some of the newer plastic models. If you take a look at like the old Warp Wolf, that is a really ugly model. It's pretty terrible. If you look at Circle Ouroboros, it's gross, frankly. However, they've done a lot of work on their older models, Privateer Press, and they've really come up with some kind of stunning, beautiful models. I mean, I don't think I can say that anymore. Their quality of model is actually pretty good. I mean, really it's what you find aesthetically pleasing. Do you like monsters and like steampunk kind of warjacks and things like that? And if you do, I think Hordes Warmachine is actually a pretty good game. I think you should check it out if you like that aesthetic now, because I don't think it was always like that. And even earlier models of, Warhammer and 40k, those were some fairly ugly models in the very early days. But, as a kid, I was super, I thought it was appealing. But over time, both companies have really done well with their sculpts. And I think if you were to ask what the quality is between the two, I don't think you could say a whole lot. I mean, Mortarion, like I said, Nagash, those are great looking models. And I think, Hordes Warmachine has also great looking models. The Stormraptor, the Hydra, those gargantuans, the Stormraptor for Ouroboros, the Hydra for Scorn. Those are just cool looking models. And even the giant gargantuan warjacks and whatnot, those are just awesome. Even the smaller warbeasts and warjacks look great too. They each, what's interesting is like all the warjacks between each army, even though they're all warjacks and all of them carry like a hammer or have an open fist, they still do a lot of detailed like sculpting on those models to make each army feel unique, and I really appreciate that. I think that's pretty neat, because essentially, I mean, they're all just like these steam-powered jacks that have a very similar form. But both games have pretty good models now, so I don't think you could say that one is better than the other, unless, it's purely up to you. But as far as quality goes, I don't think you could make a strong argument for either being better than the other. Next thing I wanted to touch on, though, was gameplay. Gameplay was a big deal for me. I remember playing, my first army was Orcs in 40k, and I remember putting out like, okay, let's play a 2,500 point game, and I'm putting out, over 100 models, and my enemy Space Marine dude that I'm playing is putting out, half that, and getting pie plated. Pie plated meaning the large blast template just on top of my models getting pooped on. And like, oh yeah, I just put all these orcs on the table. I had to like set out 20 orcs that I'd painted, and now they're dead. Kind of sucks a lot. And putting out all those models only to remove them immediately gets kind of annoying. And I feel like a lot of the Warhammer models, as far as gameplay goes, kind of operate that way. They're very one-dimensional. I mean, there's a lot of variety in their models, don't get me wrong, but most models just move up and shoot, or move up and, try to get into melee. I mean, there's not a whole lot of differences there as far as, 40k and Age of Sigmar. A lot of things, I mean, there are special rules and there's different saves and stuff, but as far as all the things they can do, they're somewhat limited, I feel like. And that's not it's not a terrible thing. It's just a giant army game, so you can't have the same variety that I think you get with Hordes and Warmachine. And what I'm namely talking about is let's take a look at these two games at their smallest point value. If you just played like, say, a 0-point game, or like a 0-point game for Hordes Warmachine, or a 500-point game for Warhammer 40k, or Age of Sigmar, or whatever their point value is, I don't remember. You're playing with, let's say 40k. You're starting with two troops and an HQ. Those two troops are just going to move and shoot probably, and your HQ might have a few spells, might have some unique abilities or some special weapons or whatever, some cool saves. But ultimately, that's kind of it, right? You're going to fight, your troops are going to fight, your HQs are going to fight, and that's about it. You're not going to see a whole lot of variety. Now, take it to a different level where you're looking at like Hordes and Warmachine. Whether you have a Warjack and Warcasters, or War Beasts and Warlocks, those models do a lot. War Beasts have animi. If they have open fists, they can throw things. They can slam things. They can headbutt things. They can use probably a lot of unique attacks. Most Warjacks and War Beasts have more than one type of attack, and then the way you spend Fury and Focus is going to change a lot of how you play those Warjacks and those War Beasts. Not to mention the way your Warlocks interact, or your Warcasters. They have a lot of stuff they can do, right? So I think that in a game makes it more exciting and more engaging, at least to me. I mean, that's not for everybody, but that's what I find. I like having a smaller little skirmish army. I can play a 30 to 45 minute game, and there's a lot of variety of things I can do, and a lot of unique options as far as how I want to build a very small army and what I can do with it. If you like, and don't get me wrong, Hordes Warmachine can get huge. You can have like vast, huge swaths of armies that, mirror 40k, and teach their own, and they can look fairly similar. But as far as like a smaller point game, or if you're slowly building an army in Hordes and Warmachine, there's going to be some cool stuff you can do as far as like each individual model having agency. And I think that's kind of what appeals to me as a player, is each model having a variety of agency. I remember like fielding Land Raiders in 40k and having them explode turn one. That's not super typical, but it is possible. I remember how frustrating that is to put this huge expensive pointed model on the table and just having it be gone. There's a lot of things like that in 40k that I feel like kind of just happen, and you just kind of remove large point values of your army and you take them off the table. Like even in Hordes and Warmachine, if that were to happen, most things get to do something before they die. Generally, that's not always the case. Sometimes your heavy gets like obliterated turn 2 or 3. I mean, it can happen if another heavy runs into it, or bad set of dice rolls for you or against you, what have you. That can change, but I tend to have better experiences as far as my units having agency in that game. The last thing I think is the most important thing that I wanted to touch on, and that is balance. I'm not the most competitive person per se, but I've played a lot of 40k, and there was a time, and there's always been a time, where there's just 1 or 2 armies on top all the time. And when you fight them, you're just generally going to lose most of the time. Like the vast majority of the time, you're just going to lose. Right now, as far as I understand, it's Tal and Eldar. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard Eldar being pretty potent and terrible for most people to play against. And that sucks, because I know how that the wheel of fortune kind of spins in that game, and whatever army just happens to be strong is strong for a long time, and it really sucks. When I played 40k, Space Wolves being able to run their little like Devastator squads, I forget there's a name for them, but they could have a lot of different variety of heavy weapons and carry a lot of las cannons and plasma rifles. And there was a point where our plasma cannons, but they could put like las cannon dudes in a rhino, truck them around really fast and shoot you, and no one else could really do that, so you're getting blasted from forever away. So by the time anything heavy got forward, if it was, whether it was a tank or a monstrous creature, what have you, it'd just be absolutely obliterated. And you really couldn't fight that, and that sucked, and that wasn't fun. And of course, being Space Wolves, they could move around those rhinos, get to objectives pretty quickly, and it was fairly annoying, and I really didn't like it. It wasn't very fun. Anyone you talk to plays Hordes Warmachine, and even if you look at the tournament listings, lots of people play a lot of different variety in this game, and there's lists, and it's not always the same army on top, which is pretty neat. There's just a larger variety. There's a lot of gameplay mechanics, and people who are really good at the game kind of shine with their own unique variety within the game. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certain lists that are pretty strong in Hordes and Warmachine, but you see a lot more variety, and that is pretty attractive to me. I really like that dynamic. And also, concerning Hordes Warmachine is if you play certain warcasters or warlocks, and let's say your enemy's playing a certain list or caster or warlock, most armies have tools or units, warjacks, what have you, to counter what your opponent's doing. You may not have taken that list, but it's not like you're left without options. There's always an option. There's always a set of units or models that will directly counter what you're fighting, which I don't feel like I had that opportunity in 40k, and that's pretty staggering for me. That's pretty important, because when I sit down and play a game, like, I don't care if I necessarily win or lose, but as long as the game's fair. If I lose and the game was fair, cool, that's fine. I make plenty of mistakes, and I'm not that great of a player anyway, but at least if I know this, like, if I lose, I want it to be because it was completely my fault. I don't want it to be because it was slighted in some way, because one army was better than another. Like, I just want to lose because I'm bad. And that happens plenty, but I always want to lose because I'm bad if I lose, right? Does that make sense? I think it does. Anyway, so those are just some initial thoughts. If you guys think differently, if you think, maybe I'm full of crap or I'm out of it, or I haven't played 40k in such a long time that I have no idea what I'm talking about, let me know. Let me know your personal experiences with the game. And, teach their own, and hopefully we'll make some more videos concerning Hordes, Warmachine, and 40k. All these are great games, don't get me wrong. If you like either one, that's awesome. Play it to your heart's content. Go out there and hobby. But let me know.